Hello, everybody. We're back. This is Mr. Tesla from World Journalism Preparatory School in Flushing, Queens, New York, coming at you with some Regents Review information. This is a little slideshow that I call the final countdown. In other words, this is the stuff that you need to know, but you were afraid to ask. On the last video, we were just starting to discuss the Constitutional Convention, which was called to revise the Articles of Confederation. And we said there was compromise, which was needed to get this job done. All right? So we're going to start with the great compromise between the big states and small states. How much power would each group have in this legislative body? All right, so the big states favor representation based on proportion, population. Okay, and the small states favor equal representation. So we have our DJ, Roger Sherman, who comes in and makes a mega mix. He makes a mashup and puts the two together. Two great tastes that taste great together. So in our legislative branch, we have the House of Representatives, which is based on population, proportional to satisfy the big states. And we have the Senate, which is based on equal representation. Now, this explains why the census, which counts population, is so important, because we need to count population to determine how many representatives each state will get in the House of Representatives. All right? The very important 3/5 compromise, which deals with the population of the slave states. Now, let's be clear. This had nothing to do with giving slaves rights. It did not make slaves citizens. All it did was count the population of those states and made slaves count for representation in Congress and for purposes of taxation. Now, as far as the power of the federal government, we have the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. As you can guess, the Federalists favor a strong federal government. Federalists are for a strong central government. The Anti-Federalists, AF, afraid of a strong central government. This will lead to the placement or the addition or the amendment of the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Okay, this will be put into the Constitution to get the Anti-Federalists to agree and sign off on the ratification or the approval of the Constitution. An influential piece of literature is a group of essays known as the Federalist Papers. These were published in newspapers in a collection, and they also were put out by some of the bigwigs in American history and convinced people to support the new government and the Constitution. So if you see a question on the Federalist Papers, it has something to do with support of the Constitution. All right? Some of the basic ideas behind the Constitution. We don't want a government, a dictatorship, a tyrant. So power is divided into three branches: the legislative, which makes the laws, the executive, which enforces, and the judicial, which judges or determines which laws agree with the Constitution. So we have three branches of government. We have a federal system, a shared system of power between the federal government and the state governments. At the end of the day, what the federal government says goes. So if a state law is in disagreement with a federal law, the state must agree with the federal law. We have a system known as checks and balances, that each of these three branches can stop one from doing something. For example, the legislative branch could try to get a law passed. They could have a bill which they want to make a law. The executive branch could veto it. Well, the legislative branch can go back around and override the president's veto. The Supreme Court, the judicial branch, can step in and say, hey, that doesn't work with the Constitution, so we're going to kick it out. Now, the legislative branch, if they feel really strongly about it, can ask for an amendment to be added to the Constitution, and that would override the Supreme Court's decision. If that was a little fast for you, there are some videos out on the net about separation of powers and checks and balances. You can check out my man, Hip Hughes. Shout out to him again, which goes over it in detail. But just understand, one branch can stop the other branch from doing something. Okay? We have the elastic clause. We have elastic on our sweats, on our collared shirts, etc. It stretches. Okay? The elastic clause is meant that the power of the government can expand when needed. The two big examples of the elastic clause, or the implied powers as they are called, are the Louisiana Purchase and the National Bank. Okay? And then a big question is something known as the unwritten Constitution. These are things that are done by the government that are not specifically stated in the Constitution, They're sort of like traditions, things that we do because they've been done for a very long time. Number one is judicial review. This is the power of that judicial branch or the Supreme Court to determine if a law is constitutional. If a law disagrees with the Constitution, according to the justices of the Supreme Court, we kick it out. We have a cabinet. The cabinet is made up of a group of people called secretaries, and these secretaries advise the president on matters such as education, the environment, and other important things that affect the daily lives of American people. We have political parties. Political parties are groups of people that think that the government should be run in a certain way. We have the Democrat and Republican parties as the two major parties in our country right now, but there are numerous political parties that have existed in our country over the 240 odd years that we've been a nation. And then we have congressional committees. For example, if we want to improve our school lunch, we will send some or get some congressmen on a committee, and they'll investigate why school lunch is bad and what can be done to make school lunch better. Okay? We're going to talk a little bit about George Washington's administration. Okay? Actually, we're going to sign off here, and we're going to cut into another video. So stay tuned for the next video where we're going to talk about George Washington's administration. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you in just a few minutes when we discuss the administration of George Washington. This is Mr. Tesler from World Journalism Preparatory School, over and out.